Why do you keep giving birth to girls? I need a boy. I need a son. What can a girl child do for me? What can she do? Can she carry my name? Can she build my legacy? Can she take over everything that I have worked for? This is what he said. This is what he believed. And this man is about to find out exactly what a girl child can do. He was about to find out the hard way. Listen closely because every African tales carries a lesson. This is African Tales by Bams.
She had a laugh that could fill a room without trying. They met at a dinner party on a rainy Friday evening. Richard, who had negotiated million-dollar deals without blinking, found himself nervous for the first time in his adult life. He asked for her number 3 times that evening, terrified she would say no. She said yes, eventually. 2 years of dating, 2 years of falling completely and deeply in love. And on a warm Saturday evening, with both families gathered around them under a sky full of stars, Richard and Grace became husband and wife. The whole room erupted. People danced. People wept. People said they had never seen a more perfect pair. And standing at that altar, holding Grace's hands, Richard felt certain, absolutely certain, that everything he had ever wanted was finally within reach. Life moved beautifully in those early years. The businesses grew, the home filled with warmth. Grace made every room feel alive. And then, the news that changed everything arrived. Grace was pregnant. Richard did not walk. He flew. He painted the nursery blue before the 2nd month. He told every friend, every colleague, every person who would listen, "My son is coming." He bought tiny trainers, a miniature suit, a small toy truck that he placed on the nursery shelf like a trophy. He had chosen the name months in advance. James Richard Carter. He practiced saying it out loud when no one was around. The night Grace went into labor, Richard sat in the hospital corridor and could not keep still. His knee bounced. He checked his phone. He stood. He sat. He stood again. He was ready to become a father. More than that, he was ready to become the father of a son. Then the doctor appeared at the end of the corridor. He walked toward Richard with a smile. "Congratulations, Mr. Carter. You have a beautiful, healthy baby girl." The corridor went quiet. Not loud quiet, just the quiet inside Richard's chest. He walked into the room. He looked at the baby. She was perfect, round cheeks, bright, curious eyes, tiny fingers curled like she was holding something precious. He held her. He smiled. But it was the smile of a man covering a wound. They named her Sophia. And that night, Richard quietly moved the toy truck to the back of the closet and repainted the nursery walls white. A year passed. Then another Grace fell pregnant again. This time, Richard said nothing about blue rooms or baby names, but the hope was still there inside him, burning quietly, stubbornly. The second child came into the world loud and strong, a girl. They named her Victoria. Richard smiled at the hospital, shook the doctor's hand, drove home alone. He sat in the car outside the house for 30 minutes without going in. The third pregnancy, he barely set up the nursery at all. The third child arrived, bright-eyed and fierce, crying like she had something important to say from the very first breath. A girl. They named her Charlotte. By now everyone could see that something had shifted in Richard. He provided everything, a beautiful home, school fees, food, clothes. Nobody could say he did not provide, but there was a distance in him, a wall that was going up brick by brick. He looked at his daughters, but he did not really see them. When Grace fell pregnant a 4th time, she prayed in a different way, not just for a healthy child, but for her husband's heart to soften before it was too late. The 4th baby came into the world peacefully, the softest delivery of them all, quiet, easy, as if the child had decided not to cause any trouble. A girl, the roundest, most peaceful little face Richard had ever seen. They named her Lily. 4 daughters. No son. And that night, Richard sat at the edge of the bed in the dark, elbows on his knees, and stared at the floor for a very long time. The wall grew taller with every passing month. Richard was not a cruel man. He never shouted. He never raised a hand. But coldness, quiet, consistent coldness, can do damage that shouting never could. He sat at the dinner table, but was never really there. He came home from work and went straight to his study. His daughters ran to the door every evening when they heard his car pull in. Every single evening, 4 little girls rushing to greet him, arms out, voices bright. He would pat ahead, give a half smile and keep walking. Sophia would hold up a drawing she made for him. He would glance at it and say, "That's nice," and set it down. Victoria would grab his hand and try to pull him to the yard to play. He would tell her he was tired. Charlotte would sit beside him and watch everything he did, studying him with those quiet eyes. He never noticed. And little Lily, too young to understand any of it, would simply climb into his lap, lay her head on his chest, and fall asleep. Those were the only moments the wall came down. Just slightly, just for a breath. Then it went back up. Grace watched all of this. She never stopped being a good wife. She never stopped being a present mother. She held the house together. The school runs, the homework, the bedtime stories, the tears, the laughter. She held all of it. But on some nights after the girls were asleep, she sat alone in the kitchen with a cup of tea that went cold, and she allowed herself to feel the weight of it. One evening, after the girls were in bed, Grace sat beside Richard in the living room. She did not shout. She never shouted. She took his hand, looked directly at him, and said, "Richard, I see what is happening, and I need you to really hear me." He looked at the television. "Those girls love you," she said quietly. "They run to the door every single evening. They draw pictures of you at school. Sophia told her teacher you are the greatest man in the world." She paused to let that land. Do you understand how much it would destroy her? One day, to find out that her father barely looked at her because she wasn't born a boy. Richard was silent. Grace stood composed, dignified, not angry, something deeper than angry. "I gave you 4 healthy children. Richard, 4 children that people pray their whole lives for and never receive. Do not let pride turn you into someone your daughters will one day have to forgive." She walked to the bedroom and left him alone with the truth. 2 weeks later, Richard's mother flew in to visit Margaret Carter. Small, sharp, steel-spined, had raised Richard alone after his father left. She had worked 3 jobs at once, and never once complained where Richard could hear her. She took one look at her son over dinner and knew exactly what was happening. She waited until the girls were asleep. Then she sat across from him at the kitchen table with a cup of tea, folded her hands, and looked at him. "Richard, Mama, I didn't come here for excuses. Silence, I am a woman. I am somebody's daughter. I raised you alone, with these 2 hands. I gave everything I had, so you could become who you are, and you sit in this house and treat your children like they are less, because they are girls." Her voice never rose. It never needed to. Every child that comes into this world breathing is a miracle, and you are sitting here grieving a miracle because it didn't arrive the way you planned. She stood, picked up her cup. "Fix yourself, Richard, before those girls grow old enough to understand what you have been doing, because children, they remember everything." She walked out, and Richard sat at that kitchen table alone. And for the first time he did not have a single thing to say in his own defense. Years moved forward, and those 4 girls, Sophia, Victoria, Charlotte, and Lily, grew into something extraordinary. Sophia consumed knowledge the way other people consume air. She was the student that teachers spoke about years after she left their classroom. Top of every class, every scholarship, every academic prize. She collected them without fanfare and kept going. She went to university on a full academic scholarship. She came home with a law degree and stood in front of her father and placed it in his hands like a quiet declaration. He nodded and said, "Well done." She smiled and walked to her room. But that night she sat on the edge of her bed and cried because well done was not enough, and she had always known it. Victoria was fire in a human body. She had been running since she could walk, and not the running of a child at play, the running of someone who needed to go somewhere and could not get there fast enough. She trained before sunrise. She trained after sunset. She sacrificed weekends, social events, friendships, all of it for the track. At 19, she became a national athletics champion. When the journalists pushed microphones toward her face and asked who had inspired her, she looked straight into the camera without blinking and said, "My father, because I have spent my whole life trying to make him proud of me." Richard saw that interview on the evening news. He turned off the television and sat in silence for a long time. Charlotte had been watching her father's business since she was 12, not with the eyes of a child, with the eyes of someone who intended to do something about it. She watched the accounts, the supplier relationships, the seasonal patterns, the gaps nobody else had noticed. When she finished university, she asked Richard for a junior role in the company. He gave it to her, reluctantly. Within 18 months, the division she managed had increased its profits by 60%. Richard called the accountant to double-check the figures. The accountant said, "Sir, your daughter is exceptional. You should know that." Richard said nothing, but he read the report 3 times that evening, and Lily, gentle, round-faced, quiet Lily, had decided from a young age what she was for. She trained as a nurse. She chose it on purpose because she had watched her mother carry everything alone for years, and she had decided that her life would be about taking care of people. She started, quietly, without announcing it, with her parents. She checked on her mother every day. She called her father every Sunday without fail, even when he gave short answers.
4 daughters, and Richard still couldn't see it. But these girls were just getting started. And what they're about to do is going to bring this man to his knees. Watch out for part 2, and you are not ready for it. Like, subscribe, and share. And make sure you are here when it drops. This is African Tales by Bams.